We're going to talk about veganism today. Very, very nice topic of veganism. And, you know, before I start talking about veganism, I want you guys to understand that I think it's a beautiful thing that people do not eat animals. I think it's a great thing. I don't think humans are supposed to be eating animals. But then again, who cares about what I think, right? Because everything is a matter of opinion. Everybody who's sharing something on camera is sharing their opinions and whatnot. But, you know, there's so many studies out there. So many studies out there. That's the funny thing. It doesn't matter what you decide to polarize or delve in. You've got carnivores with a bunch of studies to prove their points, and you got veganism to prove their points. There's a bunch of studies and meta-analysis that they can present, right? But in actuality, I asked myself this morning, who am I? What am I doing here? What are we doing here? What is this shit? You know, why am I here? What am I? Where did I come from, right? Why is this place even existing? What is this that I am doing here? What is it? And I start to think about all the things that we talk about and we think about, and you know, and so many people are just attached to their information and whatnot. I'm gonna let you know, I just thought about just the stuff that I even talk about. I'm not attached to none of my information. None of it. Okay? In fact, I am very malleable and open to being challenged on my beliefs and why I speak on certain things and I believe certain things to be so. Okay? See, that's the whole thing. I am thinking about the things that I believe in. And then I ask myself, why the fuck do I believe in these things though? Why don't I believe in something else? Why is it that other people believe in other things that I don't believe in? Why did I once believe in some things that I don't believe in now? At one point I thought they were fucking true like a motherfucker, right? And then all of a sudden now, I don't believe them to be true, but I believe other things to be true, right? But how do I know that what I believe to be true is even true? So what are we doing here, right? Veganism, right? There's a lot of, see, the way I look at veganism is backed up. It's a modern day religion. See, they believe and they depend on scientific studies for scientists to perform studies and present information to them, and they believe it to be so, right? Like a religion. And the reason I say like a religion is because back in the day, before there was scientific studies, scientific evidence and meta-analysis and whatnot, what did people depend on? That like how we depend on scientists now, what did they depend on back then? They depended on high priests to tell them what scientists tell you today. And they believed it to be so back in the day, right? So what happens now? Now we depend on scientists. So science, and then we think about science and spirituality. And then we look at what is veganism backed up by. See, I can basically say, if I look at animal flesh, we're programmed, right? And by custom, we're eating meat. We're eating flesh, right? But when you really take a really deep look at it, right? It's flesh. It's like a corpse. It's like a dead body. Regardless of how you want to look at it, it's just a dead body. And when it's bloodied and let's say gooey and stuff like that, it looks a little more appetizing once it's cooked, right? So I can see blood and a dead corpse looking weird and shit, but then once it's cooked, it's a little bit more uniform, and it looks better. It's kind of like this. Like, I remember, see, I get disgusted with the slimy part of an egg, right? I don't like that slimy part. But once you boil it, that slimy part becomes solid and it looks a little bit more edible, right? When I look at, let's say, even when if I was to eat my eggs fried, I always like to see the yellow yolk to be runny. I just don't like the slimy part on top. So I want it to be cooked enough where that slimy part is gone and I can still have the egg yolk being runny, right? So it makes it more palatable to me. It makes it not palatable. What was the word? It makes it look more appealing to me, more appetizing for me to eat. So we do this with flesh too. The flesh has to be cooked, because I mean, you're not going to eat a piece of raw meat. It's kind of disgusting, right? Yet you can look at the chemistry of the meat raw and the meat cooked. The chemistry is actually intact when the meat is raw. However, it's not easily digestible for the body to eat raw meat, because raw meat, if you see, I cook meat, right, and then if I rip it up with my hands, not a knife, but if I rip meat with my hands, it's more easily, I can easily rip it when it's cooked over when it's raw. When it's raw, it's hard to rip the meat apart, right? So the molecular structure is all changed up and whatnot. So I guess maybe people cook meat to make it a little bit more digestible, right? Because if you eat raw meat, it's very hard for the body to break down and process that meat. However, now when you cook it, you make it very, very acidic. You denature the protein. It's actually not that good for you when you cook meat. So whatever nutritional value you think you're getting out of meat, once you cook it, it's completely changed, right? Now, there's a practice called Shivambu, which is called urine therapy. There's people who drink urine. Urine is 95% water, 5% waste. Now, the 5% waste depends on what you're actually consuming to begin with, right? Nitrogen is waste, ammonia, urea, bunch of shit. There's medications that contain urea. That's the funny part, okay? So when we look at urine, okay, urine has many, many beneficial properties to it, right? There's naturopaths who are very against it, right? There's spiritualists, and there's also a different category of naturopaths that roll with urine therapy, right? But when we look at urine, it being 95% water, it looks terrible, disgusting, right? But you'd rather eat a piece of flesh over it, okay? Where it looks more appetizing. And now, because you eat this flesh, there's certain chemistry that's happening inside of you that causes this waste in your urine to be a little bit more toxic, okay? When I look at cats, for example, their urine pH changes when they're not on a biologically appropriate diet, okay? And cats are true carnivores, all right? Cats are true carnivores. Now, a cat, for example, is an animal that's a little bit more wild, and they have been domesticated, and they haven't been domesticated for that long. They're not an animal that's been with man for, like, you know, thousands of years. This is just something new, all right? Dogs have been with man a little longer. So we want to throw in our philosophies and our practices of veganism to an animal, okay? Now, the reason I bring this up is because a human, for example, what is the actual biologically appropriate diet for a human, okay? And when we start to look at who governs humans, is the government. And then we have something called the Food and Drug Administration. It's kind of monitoring, depending on where you live, the type of foods that are being presented to you. Now, we have free will. We have the choice to eat whatever we want. It's not like they're force feeding us. There's a lot of people who depend on studies to kind of help them decide what type of foods they're going to eat. But do you know yourself enough to know what's your biologically appropriate diet? When you have a cat, see, I have kittens, right? And when you have a cat, what do they, and you observe what they naturally start to do, they naturally start to hunt prey, animals, other animals, okay? Like mice, birds, you know, etc. They'll eat living animals. You're not gonna see a cat eating berries and fucking greens or nothing like that, right? They're not gonna do none of this shit in the wild. Their natural, biologically appropriate diet would be to eat flesh. Yet we domesticate these animals take them into our homes and give them a vegan diet that must be supplemented. Because I've already heard a bunch of vegans talk about that they have to supplement when they're on a vegan diet. They have to supplement them with taurine and some other forms of amino acids that they can't get through a vegan diet. So it has to be supplemented. And supplementing means something that they can't get through food. Vegan diets, for humans, for example, they say that they have to supplement with B12, right? And of course, B12 being a bacteria that you can basically find in nature, right? So I know a lot of vegans who eat boxed foods and mock meats and whatnot, which I'll get into a separate video on this if it gets too long. I may tie the information on that in this video if I have time. But what is the human's biologically appropriate diet, and why does that even matter? Okay, information itself can mold and shape your reality, but everything in this world is just information. But what is the point of information, right? I am aware based on memory, right? I have memories of what has happened in my life, which is basically determining what I'm doing right now here in my space and time and reality, okay? Based on memory, patterns, algorithms, the internet, everything is based on algorithms and patterns. Relationships, I remember that there was a friend of mine who was in a fucking toxic ass relationship, and me so confidently tell him, bro, why don't you just fucking leave her, bro? Just break up with her, and like, it's toxic, bro. And I'm there talking about it as if it was easier said than done. See, from my perspective, me telling him that, yeah, it sounds so easy, because I look at her as a fucking crazy bitch who he should just break up with. But from his point of view, his perspective, and the life he's had and the memory he has towards her and all that they've been through, it's hard to break up. It becomes a spiritual tie, like a tendril and cord. That tendril and cord is created by memories, okay? And then you start to ask yourself, well, what happens now from the big scale of things? Well, why do we have memorial services, 911 memorials, Black History Month? Why? Because they want to keep repeating these things and instill it into your psyche to mold your reality a certain way, right? So religion, same thing, right? If I was here every day just experiencing life, right? I mean, we can have instinctual memories, right? Let's say a cat has instinctual memory, but also it has I forgot what, I don't know what word I want to use, but like they know by instinct, right, what's danger and what's not. They have these senses that let them know when danger is present and when danger is not present, right? So they don't live under the concept of time, right? Like they don't know if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. They don't know if it's 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning or 7 p.m. They don't know none of that shit. They're just going by the cycles, but they're pretty much in tune with nature. I'll give you an example, like birds. Birds just know to fly south, right, for the winter. But what is that to them? They're just in tune with nature. They are the environment, and they're one with the environment. They know what they need to do when they have to do it, right? If there's danger present, they know when to leave, when to stay, and when when to do things. See, humans don't do that. Humans are not in tune with nature at all. So birds know what to eat, cats know what to eat, and certain wild animals in the wild know what to eat, right? So when we start to talk about, let's say dogs or cats, they start getting human diseases, right? So human diseases, we categorize human diseases as cancer, diabetes, and whatnot, but we say it's human diseases, but who is to say that those diseases are even human diseases? Why are they categorized as human diseases? Because of the diets that humans are eating, right? So humans are eating a diet that's not biologically appropriate. So we start to get symptoms of that we want to call diseases and call them the actual diseases, like give them names, right? But they're just symptoms arising from the root cause of one thing. So when an animal gets cancer or diabetes, we categorize that as human diseases. But what are we feeding our animals? Most of the time they'll eat table scraps, right? And they'll eat dog food or cat food that's full of preservatives that come in a can that's not from nature, right? It was processed in a laboratory. So now, from what I'm hearing, is that, oh, cats can have problems even on a high meat diet, right? No, cats cannot have that problem on a high meat diet. Cats will have that problem on a cooked high meat diet, but not a raw high meat diet, right? They're designed to eat raw meats with bones and flesh and all that, and even the fur and the feathers attached to that shit, right? So to a human, we categorize this as something bad, right? We say this is something bad. In fact, vegans are animal rights activists, but yet I've heard some vegans say that they are all for killing carnivorous animals, which is part of what nature is. So you're not an animal rights activist, because if you were an animal rights activist, you'd be a animal rights activist for all animals. So you're not an animal rights activist, okay? You're a vegan activist, not an animal rights activist. Now, when you look at it from this perspective now, right? Cats will go kill, torture a rat, let's say. And it may even be a group of them doing it. I've seen it in my yard happening at one time when I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I heard like a real loud squeal, and I had my window open, and I go outside, and because I got cats in my garden, and I just seen the rat getting tortured by a bunch of cats. I'm like, oh shit. The cat's trying to escape, and they pounce on it, fuck it up a little bit, rough it up, and this shit just happened for like maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes before it actually ended up killing the rat. And then one of the alpha cats actually ended up decapitating and tearing the head off, right? Now, to a rat, right? If from the rat's perspective, this is a terrible situation for that rat, okay? From the cat's perspective, the cat is happy. It's doing cat things. In fact, it does such a... It's so proud of its work that it would even present this rat to its owner and say, look what I got for you, right? This is great. Look what I got. It brings it back to you as a trophy. Now, us as humans, we categorize that as the cat did torture, murder, rape, right? But to the cat is just doing cat things. The cat is proud of what it did. The cat looks at it's doing cat things. It's doing what a cat is supposed to do. But we labeled that as a bad thing, as a human, right? So the vegans want to kill, and not all vegans, just a couple vegans I've heard say they want to kill carnivorous animals, right? Because they are murderers and torturers and rapists, right? Okay? So from their evolutionary species, they're not aware of what they do. You vegans, right, that say this are aware from your human perspective, labeling what that cat did from a higher evolutionary species, right? So something higher on an evolutionary scale than you humans, okay? I can say that you're doing the exact same thing that you're pointing the finger at. And why is this? Because, see, when you look at it from the perspective of the cat doing that, the cat does not know what it's doing. You know not what you do either, right? Because whenever you go and you are debating somebody, right? You are literally sort of like a serial killer, right? And the reason I say this is because if you look at it from the perspective of another individual outside of you, your body, to break it down, you consist of trillions of cells, and these cells are actually sentient cells, right? and this is a fact, based on the perspective of the individual, determines the health and life of these cells, right? These cells hold a charge in life, depending on the, let's say, the life force or the chi of that individual, right? The diets that you're bringing in, right? The cells get compromised based on dehydration, okay? Or a lack of oxygen to the cells that cause a mutation, and they tend to multiply, which we start to call symptoms called diseases, okay? So let's say, for example, it's not even just diet, but it can be stress. So if I'm debating somebody and I cause you stress while I'm debating you, because now let's say I put you in a corner because your information ain't valid to some extent, I'm overpowering you, right? Now, we can look at this from the prey-predator perspective as well. If I'm going out looking for a debate or for a fight, I'm literally hunting, right? But if I'm debating you and I'm causing you stress, I'm destroying a bunch of your cells. And we are actually, it's two people, it appears to be two individuals going at war, but it's literally a community of cells going to war with another community of cells. And don't forget, you consist of many brains. See, we have the intellectual brain that we use to actually communicate and do this shit with, right? But there are other brains that we are actually utilizing. There's the heart space, where I can actually be speaking from the heart, or I can be speaking from the intellect. I have a gut feeling, which is literally the first brain. And depending on what you're eating and the chemistry of what you're putting in there determines the health of, like, the bacteria that's in your gut. There's a ratio between gut yeast to good bacteria, right? And that has to be in perfect balance. I could be thinking from my small head, right? Which is my dick. And I could just be like, oh, I'm thinking from my little head. It could be, you could hear things like, oh, I got that girl pregnant because I wasn't thinking from, you know, up here. I was thinking with my little head. I was chasing my dick or whatnot, right? So you're full of brains, but they all have to work in harmony. That's what makes you a complete universe, right? Now, the whole thing is, this topic may sound a little crazy to vegans. My camera's going to cut off, so I'll probably make another part. But we will talk soon. If you like it, like and share and subscribe, and we'll talk soon.